Hello and welcome. My name is Emma Handy here doing another series of videos here on StarCityGames.com. This week it's going to be modern again, but the flavor this time is a little different than my last series on Storm. This time I'm going for a combo-y type of deck, but it is a little bit more fair. This week we're going with the green-white Vizier Elves. A few weeks ago, Ross Merriam had a pretty great finish, getting all the way to the top 8 at SCG Richmond with a similar list to this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and walk us through the deck a little bit and talk about what the deck's trying to do, where we're going with all of this. So first off, we kind of just have our one-drop Elf Brigade. They're kind of the biggest identifiers of what the deck is trying to do. So first off, we just have Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves, which are both just the quintessential mana dorks. From there, we're going over to Heritage Druid, which is a green for a 1/1 that lets you tap 3 of your elves to get 3 mana, and it gets around Summoning Sickness. That ends up being a really big deal because it lets you kind of just vomit your hand onto the table as early as the second turn. We might end up getting into some of those draws here with the videos, so I'm not going to go and spoil anything. But the other great card with Heritage Druid specifically is Nettle Sentinel. Nettle Sentinel basically makes the deck because of Heritage Druid. It being a 1-mana 2/2 that doesn't untap unless you cast a green spell sounds bad, but in a lot of cases, because our deck is, a Vizier of Remedies, 17 lands, and 42 green spells, it actually is a 1-mana 2/2 that untaps additional times in this style of deck. So a lot of cases you'll see Heritage Druid tap 3 things, including a Nettle Sentinel, cast 2 more creatures, which untap the Nettle Sentinel, which lets you tap more creatures to keep playing more, and so on and so forth. You get a very large battlefield very quickly. Devoted Druid and Vizier of Remedies kind of make up the combo angle of the deck. So Devoted Druid is a 2-mana 0/2 that taps for a green. You can put a -1 counter on it to untap it. So when in design, or in theory, Devoted Druid was just a mana dork that you could use a second time once. With Vizier of Remedies, because if any -1 counters would be put on your creatures, 1 fewer is going to be put on them. That actually kind of works in a pretty crazy way with Devoted Druid, where you can just untap Devoted Druid with no drawback over and over, so you just have infinite green mana if you can assemble a Vizier of Remedies and a Devoted Druid that isn't summoning sick. We'll move on to how we can kill people from there as we go through the deck list, but part of our fair game plan here is Dwynen's Elite, which is just a 2-mana 2/2 that makes a 1/1 elf when it comes into play. That's great with Heritage Druid in particular. You'll have a lot of curves that are turn 1 Heritage Druid, turn 2 Dwynen's Elite, trigger, get an elf, tap the elf token, the Heritage Druid, and the Dwynen's Elite for another creature, and you just get to keep playing cards from there. Dwynen's Elite also helps with your sort of, your backup beatdown plan, where you're just a bunch of dumb 1/1s and 2/2s that do your best to kill the opponent. Elvish Visionary used to be one of the more important cards in the deck because it could basically just keep the cards coming. You're getting a 1/1 body that has relevant creature types, and then you're also getting another card for your trouble. With stuff like Collected Company existing now, we don't really have to rely as heavily on Elvish Visionary. Reclamation Sage is a bullet in the deck. Because we're a Court of Calling deck, we have a lot of ways to search our library for whatever it is that we need. Having a main deck Reclamation Sage frees up a sideboard slot, while also giving us a main deck out to certain problematic cards. It gives us a way to Court of Calling for an answer to, say, Cranial Plating or Ensnaring Bridge. There's a lot of little things where the card ends up being great if you have it. It will win you entire games that you would have lost otherwise. And even if they're not playing artifacts and enchantments, it's a 3-mana 2/1, and just with a relevant creature type. Let's not downplay that for a second. It's a relevant body. The least it can do is attack. Elvish Archdruid is one of the scarier cards in the deck. This is the sort of kill on sight. If you're playing another deck, you really need to get Elvish Archdruid off the table. It, in addition to being a Lord effect, just the tap, get a green for each elf you control, ends up being a lot of mana. It ends up being something to the effect of a 3-mana 2/2 that pumps your team and taps for 5 mana. which in conjunction with the other big payoff card, Azuri Renegade Leader, generally equates to, 15 power and toughness and trample being spread amongst your board. Azuri is kind of our big payoff card, also for the Devoted Druid Vizier of Remedies combo. You get to protect your combo a little bit. You can't protect the Vizier, but you can protect the Devoted Druid, and then even though Regenerate taps it, you can untap it with the Vizier. Whoa! But with infinite mana, you just get to overrun over and over and over and over until you have a bunch of infinitely large elves, and they die, and, then you win. It's great. So from there, we're a collected company deck. We just play a bunch of little creatures that end up getting incremental value, or just progressing our game plan of putting a bunch of little creatures on the board with relevant creature types and then pumping them. And finally, Court of Calling kind of can tutor up our combo pieces, or it can just get an Elvish Archdruid if we don't aren't on the combo plan, or an Azuri if we just need to save stuff from a Supreme Verdict or something to that effect. The final thing is something that Ross Merriam added to the deck with his top 8 berth in Richmond. He had an Eternal Witness in the deck. Here, I actually played this deck a few months ago at the SCG Invitational in Roanoke back, I want to say that was in July. It may have been June, I may be misremembering. Either way, not particularly relevant. In this slot, I had originally had a Mirror Entity because I wanted one more payoff card. But what Eternal Witness does for the deck that the other payoff card didn't is she can also act as redundancy for your combo. So say they kill the Vizier of Remedies, you can just get the Vizier back. Or, as long as you've already drawn another payoff card, Ewit can just get back the other payoff card. There are also games where she's just a good thing to hit off company because she rebuys your collected company. She barely does a lot of things, and I think that utility is worth something. And that's most of what you really have to see in the main deck. We're only on 17 lands because we are kind of overloading on the dorks, so I think it's pretty justifiable to shave one. With the Horizon Canopies, it's maybe okay to go up to the 18th since we can convert these to spells later on, and Pendlehaven also kind of pulls double duty as a spell land. But for now, I've kind of just been jamming the 17 lands, and I've been pretty happy with it. Sideboard-wise, a lot of this is pretty formulaic. A lot of what we're looking at are a bunch of chord targets. That's to say, it's a bunch of things that we can tutor up to just completely swing a matchup by itself. Burrington Forge Tender can counter an entire sweeper. Sameless Selfless Spirit can counter an entire Supreme Verdict, despite it being uncounterable. Even Mind Censor makes the other collected company decks, well, specifically the Court of Calling decks, a lot worse. Eidolon of Rhetoric just crushes Storm. Scavenging Ooze hurts anything with graveyard synergies. Kataki wrecks the Affinity decks. Revoker hurts the Planeswalker decks. And Chameleon Colossus destroys Grixis Shadow. They just don't have an answer to this. They can't push it. All of their creatures aren't big enough. Even if they try to bolt, snap, bolt, or something, you can just grow the Chameleon Colossus with its own ability. Not to mention, on top of all of that, Chameleon Colossus is an elf, which is absurd that somehow ended up being that way. Thanks, Wizards. Finally, we just have Path to Exile, which is kind of our answer to the big creature strategies. It helps us not die while we're setting up our combo. Rest in Peace is just a one-of other form of graveyard hate. It's so bad in multiples that we don't want to play a bunch of them, and we also can just have Ooze and then Chord for the Ooze. But having a second Ooze isn't very good, so this is just kind of the other, more final form of graveyard hate. This Fracturing Gust could likely just be a Reclamation Sage. I've waffled on that one a little bit, but Fracturing Gust being a sweeper that we can cast pretty quickly with all of our mana dorks really makes me think that it's worth it. Particularly how good this is against Affinity really just swings the pendulum in that direction. Killing Edge Champion can be a problem sometimes, so that kind of makes me give the nod to Fracturing Gust. Finally, the last kind of, eyebrow raiser, so to speak, is Lead the Stampede. In Ross Merriam's article, he advocated for at least 2 copies, maybe 3. I'm just playing the 1 here because I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of trouble grinding people out while we still have Eternal Witness in our deck. He had shaved it in his, I haven't. And as a result, I think I'm comfortable just sticking with the Leading Stampede for now. But let's go ahead and jump into some games and see how everything ends up going. See you in a second.